Hello, and welcome back to the final installment of the Japan Audio Diary mini-series, if we're gonna, give it a title. But this episode covers our final day in Fujikawa Guchiko, so the town where Mount Fuji is, as well as the very end of our time in Japan, which was primarily spent in Tokyo. All right, let's go.
That is the sound of our very frozen AstroTurf outside of our Airbnb. I think it was 29 or 28 degrees last night. Whew. Good morning. It is December 6th at 6:15 a.m. And we are currently, we woke up very early. We woke up at 5:30 and we biked across town in sub-freezing temperatures to see the sunrise on Mount Fuji, which is currently what we're doing. We're waiting for the sun to come up. Whew, it's going to be pretty. We've got some lovely kind of low misty clouds behind Mount Fuji, but perfectly clear views of the mountain with a lovely reflection of it in the lake in front of us. We've got spam musubi for breakfast, an egg salad sandwich from Family Mart. I got hand warmers. Life is pretty good right now.
Hello, it is December 6th, 5:30 p.m., and this is quite possibly the earliest check-in I have done yet. So after spending this morning watching the sunrise with Mount Fuji, we decided to come back to the house and warm up. Something that's actually been kind of interesting that I didn't really know about Japan. There is a pretty strong coffee culture here, but that still doesn't mean that the coffee shops open super early. In fact, it seems like most coffee shops open at 9 or 10. And obviously the sun rose very early this morning and it was so cold. So we just decided to come back to our Airbnb and warm up here. And Owen made us some coffee and we ended up working until almost 1. While we were here in this area around Fuji, it's a more rural community. Unless you're into amusement parks, really and truly what you're doing is you are enjoying Mount Fuji, you're riding a bike around the assorted lakes, or you can go to an onsen. And in fact, our original plan was to go to an onsen today to warm up after being very cold outside. But turns out all of the onsens in this area are not tattoo friendly. So I unfortunately would not have been allowed in, which was kind of a bummer. I won't lie. But I ended up doing some research and I had a small consolation prize that we ended up going after a little bit later. I will circle back to that in a moment. So yeah, we just knocked out some work, but the plan was always, while we were here, knowing kind of the balance of what there was that we wanted to do versus how much time we had here. And so the plan was always to work. Very productive, very excited. Tomorrow, the first episode of my Japan podcast comes out. And I'm very excited about it. I feel like I've done a lot of that episode helped me do a lot of processing of everything that's been going on here. And so I'm very thankful for that. And then after that, we decided to head out with our bikes that we rented. And there is another cable car system here that goes up to the top of a mountain. And we did one of those in Miyajima, which was a little island that we talked about off the coast of Hiroshima. I got this. And that one was so amazing. And so we're like, oh, well, this one's going to gain really cool views of the lakes that are in this area, Mount Fuji. But it turns out it was a little bit more of like an amusement park vibe. And I wouldn't say that that's necessarily our thing. So we decided to go up. We kind of walked around for a minute, and then we didn't even take the cable car down. We decided to hike down. And then we picked up our bikes, and our consolation prize was the hotel that we rented our bikes from also has an onsen that is actually tattoo friendly, but the onsens, the genders are separate. And Owen and I just didn't want to, we wanted to like enjoy something like that together. So we just like weren't necessarily feeling super motivated to do that. And so they have a foot onsen that is just right out in front of the hotel overlooking the lake, which is so cool. And it's totally free. And they're pumping the same water that they have in their onsen, and they have it just going into this marble foot trough. And so we kind of sat there for a little while, soaking our feet. It was so nice. Our feet have been killing us just because we've been averaging like 10 miles of walking a day. In the last 2 days, we've been doing a lot of biking. So it was just really nice to do that. And then while we were sitting there, we struck up a conversation with two really cool people that we met from Tokyo, and they had a ton of amazing recommendations for when we go to Tokyo tomorrow. So we're very excited to check those out. Oh, and by the way, before I ultimately completely forget, because I already have for days, on the subject of sleeping on the futons on the ground, it's so comfortable. I really, really like it. The only thing I found is that it can be a little cold at first. So it's been very cold. We've had a cold snap since we've been here. And because it is so cold, it just feels like you have to warm the bed up. But I mean, honestly, that could probably be said about any bed. But I think it's really comfortable. I really liked it. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I find it to be almost no different from sleeping in a bed on a frame off the ground. If you like firm beds, which I do, I think it's for you. It is December 7th, 10:12 p.m. Today was primarily a transfer day. So we transferred from the Fuji-ish area back in to our final destination of the trip, which I'm very sad about. Happy and sad about, I guess. Happy to be back in Tokyo, which is where we're going to be spending the last week. And obviously sad just knowing that this is the last place that we're going to be visiting on this trip. Bus ride, pretty straightforward. And then once we got into Tokyo, we had a couple of hours before we could actually check into our Airbnb. And most of the train stations have a very convenient locker system that you can just pay with the same card that you pay for the train to stash your bags of assorted sizes. We had a little bit of difficulty actually finding one that was unlocked, but once we did, dropped our bags and we went off on foot. We ate burritos, which was weirdly satisfying. I really miss Mexican food. And then the other day, while we were in the Fuji area, we were at a coffee shop that had an incredible collection of photography books. And the guy who owned the shop, who was also the barista, it was his personal collection of books. And he pointed out to Owen one of his books that was his personal favorite. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And turns out it's one of the most successful Japanese photography art books in the last couple of years to sell. It sounds like it's sold like tons of copies, and honestly sounds to be that it can be difficult to track down. And so I did a little bit of research before we came back into town, and I found a place that said that is their desire to be the world's best art book shop. And so we decided with some of our spare time to go to that shop and try to find the book. And we were successful. And I am so excited about it. I feel like, let me grab it. The artist name is Katori Kawashima. Mirai-chan is the name of the book. I did a little bit of research. It documents the photographer's friend's daughter, 1 year of her life. And it kind of documents 1 year of her life, but also 4 seasons in this rural community that she lives in here in Japan. She's such an expressive little girl, but I think that what is so captivating about this book and his photography is he just has a way of capturing these like really beautiful and special, charming moments in this girl's life. So it's just really beautiful documentary and photography work. And I don't think I've ever been so captivated by a book. But the book itself is, and by the way, to clarify, not just a book, but a photography book. I don't know if you can hear the siren going by. I'm just going to talk through it. It's the nature of being in Tokyo. But anyways, I just really wanted, well, okay, well, I'm waiting for this siren to go by. I'm also just going to look up the name of the bookstore because the bookstore was really something to behold. It was nearly an entire floor in a shopping mall. Let's see. Tsutaya Books, Ginza is the name of the bookstore. I could have done so much damage there. It was truly like one of the most amazing bookstores I've ever been to, and it definitely was very accurate. It seemed to be more of a focus on art books, but Japan just kind of, their book game is kind of next level. The print quality is amazing, the paper, the variety, the designs. I could have lived in there. So I'm very thankful to have found that book. And then after that, I caught up with my dear friend Gianna, who's in Sweden. It was so lovely to talk to her. And then Owen and I went to a pizza place that was very high on our list. It's called Savoy. And we decided to get 2 pizzas. The first of which was like a sushi pizza. It was soy sauce, tuna, wasabi. Oh, and was there cheese on it? Mm-hmm. There was? Yeah. Was it mozzarella? But it had rice wine vinegar on it. Owen joked. First of all, okay, I've never had a pizza like this before. So it was sushi grade tuna in the middle, kind of in a nice big lump with chives. And then it kind of gradated out from there to the cheese, the oils, and the sauces. And then you took fresh ground wasabi and you kind of smeared it on the tuna before taking a bite. I think that pizza caused a wrinkle in time for me. Immediately after, Owen and I were talking, and I had such a big deja vu moment. But that pizza is now in the pantheon, a very short list of the most memorable pizzas I have ever had. It made me cry actual tears, not because of the wasabi, but because it was that good. And then the next one we had was Japanese beef. I'm trying to remember what else was on it. Actually, I have a picture here. So Haida beef, Haida beef, Bismarck. It had 2 eggs, green onions, mozzarella, and soy sauce on it. And it was also absolutely divine. It was very subtle and surprisingly more subtle than the tuna pizza. Oh, man. But they were so good. But I think that I'm going to need to journal about that tuna pizza before I can fully wrap my mind around it. Incredible. And then we came back to our Airbnb and we decided to watch a movie that takes place here in Tokyo that we've really wanted to see called Perfect Days. It was made in 2023, so it's relatively new. It's won a ton of awards, but it's just a very, It's a movie about a man who cleans toilets, the public toilets of Tokyo. And it's just about how truly happy he is, despite maybe from the outside perspective having a very simple life. I found it to be very moving. All in all, a simple and very good day. It is December 11th at 9 a.m. We have now been in Tokyo for a few days. Since being here, we have had so many things that we have been trying to pack in that it just feels like we have not had a spare moment. We only have a few days left. To be precise, we have 3 days left until we leave. And we just had all of these things that we were saving for Tokyo when we came back. And because of that, we have been all over Kingdom Come, seemingly, on the train system to go to all these different temples, exhibitions, different parts of town. We've been doing a lot of Christmas gift shopping. And I feel like I haven't had a moment to sit down and kind of lay out what we have been doing. And to be honest with you, I feel like I have 2 things that have really jumped out to me that I want to share that have transpired since we came back to Tokyo a few days ago. And the first is we went to the Team Lab's Borderless exhibition. If you are not familiar, Team Lab is seemingly a collection of creatives that do these really incredible long-term art installations. They seem to specialize in light art, projection mapping, and Borderless in particular is really intriguing because it's this huge space and there's seemingly countless rooms and they're light projections that interact with the space, with the people in it. There's a lot of like music and sound, and there's even smells that are piped into the room to create this really immersive experience. And it's called Borderless because the art is not confined by room. It moves throughout the space, it changes, it morphs, it evolves, different pieces interact with each other because there's definitely different like motif themes that you do happen to kind of stumble across multiple times in the space. This is an exhibition that I've been wanting to see for a really long time. I find installation art, it's one of my favorite art varieties because of how immersive it is. I think that there's something so beautiful about art when it can create a feeling or a memory or an environment that you can really get yourself lost in. And installation art really embodies that idea. We entered at like 9:15 and I don't think that we left until 1 p.m. We were there for a very long time. And it's really interesting. Over the course of our experience there were different rooms that definitely felt like, or different installations that felt like they carried a charge of some description. And I feel like some of them made you really contemplate death. Some of them really made you contemplate the idea of like memories and ideas and the inner workings of the human brain. There were some that made you realize that we are nature, nature is us, and how beautiful that is. It was an incredibly moving experience. I feel like if you are anywhere near Japan, I could not recommend enough that you check out any one of the many Team Lab installations that are, there's multiple in Tokyo, there's one in Osaka, and I'm trying to think of where the other, I think that there's even one in Singapore. But I now have this goal to see every Team Lab exhibition that they have. Owen actually has experience with projection mapping, and so it's been it was really interesting to see what that idea was taken to the absolute nth degree. I don't really want to say much more about it because I think it's more important that you just go and experience it. But it was, I think it's like going to be one of my favorite things that we did in Japan. Obviously, it's so incredibly different than a lot of the, cultural art that we've been seeing. It's so rare that art can be so incredibly immersive. If there's one thing that people ask me more than anything else, it's how I store my clothes on the road. I have been using the same set of Eagle Creek packet cubes for the last 8.5 years. Since 1975, Eagle Creek has logged more miles and cleared customs more than anyone in the business. That hard-won insight is built into everything they make, from luggage to packing cubes and everything in between. In fact, I store my film in an Eagle Creek bag that was handed down to me from my grandmother who used it in her travels over 20 years ago. And guess what? It's still going strong. Check them out at headnowhere.com/Eagle Creek. As longtime fans of Eagle Creek, we're proud to have them as a part of our everyday life, but also as a sponsor of Camp Nowhere. 1 trekking pole. 2 trekking pole. I was just setting up my trekking poles because we are about to go for a hike, and I had a thought. I love my trekking poles so much. Just setting them up gets me so stoked to be out on trail. And I think that just having the right piece of gear for the job just kind of does that to you. It makes you excited to get outside and do what you love. As a self-proclaimed gear nerd, I have made detailed gear guides plus some handy affiliate links and discount codes for brands that we personally know, love, and trust. If you decide to grab anything from those links or gear guides, it helps support all of our creative projects that we're working on, from films to podcasts and life on the move. So, if you are gearing up for your next adventure, check it out at headnowhere.com/gear. And thank you so much for helping us stay rolling. Okay, gotta run. This trail is not gonna hike itself. This episode of Camp Nowhere is brought to you by RedArc. For the last 4 years on the road, our entire life has been running on RedArc's power management systems. Whether we're charging our camera gear, powering Starlink for remote work, or making this podcast in the middle of nowhere, RedArc always keeps everything running smoothly. They've spent decades perfecting their products based on customer needs, putting in countless hours to design and test the toughest mobile power solutions out there. Born in the rugged terrain of Australia, RedArc has been leading the way in mobile power solutions for 45 years. For more information about reliable off-grid power, go to headnowhere.com/RedArc, which can also be found in the show notes. Hey there, Mac here. I don't know why I said that. It's always Mac. Anyways, if you're enjoying Camp Nowhere, maybe you would want to consider checking out our Patreon. By joining, you'll get access to a ton of cool things, such as the ad-free version of this podcast, early screenings to our films, behind-the-scenes glimpses into life on the road, and a whole lot more exclusive content. Plus, your support helps us keep creating and improving as multifaceted storytellers. We legitimately could not do it without you, so a big thank you to everyone who has already joined us in our sunny little corner of the internet. If you're curious, take a spin around at headnowhere.com/Patreon. See you there. Okay, the next thing is we were in the Fuji area. We had our feet in this great little onsen. It was just like a foot onsen, so to speak. And we met some people from Tokyo, and they asked if we had any plans while we were there, specifically along the lines of food. And they had some recommendations, and one of them was a tofu restaurant. And it was funny because last night when we were looking for something to eat, There was another place that Owen really wanted to go to, a yakitori restaurant. But Owen said that when he looked at the pictures for what the tofu restaurant had, he had almost no context to understand what it was that he was looking in the pictures. And we kind of felt like that was pretty intriguing. It's not often that when you look at pictures of food, you really have no idea what you're looking at or what to expect. And so we ended up traversing town to get over to this tofu restaurant, and it was such an incredible experience. Not only was the restaurant itself very beautiful, it was very Japanese. There was water features. It was very quiet, lots of wood. It was just a very beautiful space. And then we had tofu in so many different forms. We had one that was cooked tableside, and it was so luxuriously silky, so beautiful. The texture was insane. And you just had it with a little squeeze of lime, a little pinch of salt, and then poured some soy sauce over it. It was beautiful. We also had fried triangles of tofu, a little bit more firm, but the fry on it was just mind-blowing. And then we also had some tofu skin dumplings, and then 2 different desserts that were made with tofu. And I think that, yeah, as I mentioned, it's just so rare to have no context for what you're going to be having. But tofu is something that I think that everybody has some experience with, but we have never had an experience with what is considered to be a high quality or a high-end tofu. Could not recommend that restaurant enough. I'm so happy that we went out of our way to check that place out. So we only have 2 more days left. We're thinking we got some work to do today. And then I think that we're probably going to venture out to explore a couple more temples that are in the Tokyo area that we still have yet to see. I'm not really ready to sign off on Japan as a whole right now. I'm going to save that for another day. It is December 12th at 11:03 p.m. to be very, very specific. Today was our last day, full day anyways, in Japan, and we are about to have our last sleep in Japan. And I'm feeling a lot of things. But I guess before I get into all of that, what we did today. I had 2 rolls of film, one in my medium format camera and one in a point and shoot, of which we procured since being here in Japan. And I don't like to have film in my cameras when we go through security. I try to have them empty, and I keep all of my film in a scan-proof bag that just goes in my check bag.
Okay, I need to break in here for a second. This is future Mac, here to tell past Mac that even that X-ray proof bag that you're putting your film in is not going to be enough to overcome the strength of the X-ray machines when you check your bag. So, moral of the story, don't do that. It is always a huge hassle to bring your film in through security because you have to ask them to hand check it. And a lot of people at security really don't like being asked to hand check things. But it is still the best way. I have a lot of film now to tell the tale of why it's not a good idea to check your film, even if it's in an X-ray proof bag. All right, back to the diary.
So anyways, I just really wanted to blow through the last bit of film that I had in those cameras. So we decided to go to a temple that is very close to where we were staying. And while we were kind of out exploring, we heard some drums, and we did a little hustle to see if we could figure out where the sound of the drums was coming from. And turns out it was inside the temple, and it was the beginning of a little ceremony that took place. I think in total it probably took about 15 minutes. But it was really quite impactful. There was a lot of drums, chanting, incense, sound bowls. And I believe that after it was over, Owen described it as entrancing. And I think that that's the best word for it. It really was really something to see and hear and experience. We've been to so many temples at this rate, and we have seen absolutely zero ceremonies. So to see all of the different things that are kind of out in the space, and to kind of see how they're interacted with was really interesting. It was really hard to look away from. It really grabbed our attention, and I'm so glad that it just out of pure happenstance we happened to come across that. So I would say that that was a real highlight of the day. And then we had the goal of finding one more fortune plus character. So I don't believe that I have talked about this at all, but I've kind of been collecting these really cool clay figures that come with fortunes inside of them. They're usually about 300 yen. And when you get them, on the bottom, there's a little hole and a little tab, and you pull the tab and your fortune comes out. And oftentimes you tie them onto these long ropes at the temple after reading your fortune. But then you get this really cool figure that is a reminder of the fortune that you got. And each temple seems to have a different character. Some temples are known, particularly Shinto temples, have different characters. And it seems to be that the little clay figures are based on that. So I was wanting to get them as gifts for family. And so I needed one more. And so we went to hunt for a temple that had them. And thankfully we did find one. And then we just kind of spent the rest of the day wandering around and taking in the sights. Owen and I went down this famous little bar street that has all of these teeny tiny little restaurants, like 200 restaurants packed in, bars and restaurants packed into one city block pretty much. And we stopped at a little yakitori restaurant for a little lunchtime snack. Then we came back and packed a little bit. And then we met up with some new friends that we met/ran into yesterday while we were out exploring. And it's the first person whose work I really admire on the internet, YouTube specifically, that we've run into out in the wild. And I just felt very compelled to stop and say something to him. We often have people stop us when they recognize us and always have the nicest things to say. And it always is such a nice feeling to know that your work is positively impacting somebody. So I just really wanted to make sure that he knew that. And he was working on a project with someone actually that we have worked with before. And I'm not going to share names, but it ended up being that we met up with them for dinner tonight. And it was just a really lovely experience to tie a human to work that we really admire, and also to meet somebody in person that we've worked with kind of through email. All in all, it was a very lovely last day in Japan. I'm so sad, truly, to be leaving, but I think even more so, I'm just thankful that this experience happened. Japan has been very moving in so many ways, and I think that maybe this is the first time I don't feel sad to be leaving a place, because the thing is, like, whenever we leave a place that I like and find intriguing, and you just know you're leaving so much on the table, but there's this feeling of sadness that you're leaving because you don't know when you're going to come back. And even though I have no idea when we're coming back to Japan next, But I just have this strong sense that we will be back very soon here. So I'm just sad because I want more now. But I'm not feeling the way that I normally do when I leave a place, because something just tells me that Japan is going to be maybe a bigger part of our life in the future. All right. I need to get some sleep. Talk to you tomorrow.
Before I let you go, I do want to share 2 additional recordings that I collected from elsewhere in Japan that were honestly just too good to leave out. Here's the first one. That is the sound of rain hitting the awning of a storefront. At first, when I heard the sound, I thought it was drums, because that's what it sounds like. But as we got closer to the store, we were just walking around outside. As it was raining, I realized what the sound was coming from, and I stood there and recorded this sound. It was just too good not to. And this is the second sound. That is the sound of nightingale floors. Specifically, this floor style construction is from shogun castles. And I think that it was rumored for a while that it was designed that way so you would know if ninjas were sneaking around your castle. But that's actually not the case. It's just the byproduct of the way that the floors are made. There's a little metal pin that rubs as weight passes over them, and it makes this incredible sound. And what you're hearing is actually a ton of people walking across the floors, making just the most lovely symphony of what sounds like nightingales. I think that ultimately this was one of my single favorite sounds that I collected in Japan, aside from the one of the temple proceedings while we were in Tokyo. That one was incredibly special too.
Hello from the Haneda Airport, reporting to you live from a lounge while we wait for our flight. That is in 3 hours. We had to check out of our Airbnb much earlier than our flight, so we just decided to come here and work. And in 3 hours, we will no longer be in Japan. All right, I'm sure I'll check in with you before then.
Current day Mac speaking. We have now been back from Japan for 2.5 weeks, and we can kind of get into a little bit of kind of what we are left with, what I'm feeling left with since returning. But before we get there, obviously I never checked back in. We ended up leaving our lounge kind of, like right at the time we needed to get on the plane. And I did make one last stop at the 7-Eleven in a desperate effort to pick up wasabi flavored Kit Kats, obviously for science. But the line wrapped around the entire 7-Eleven. So ultimately, I gave up. I was like, I don't know that these wasabi flavored Kit Kats are worth it. And it was obviously a long flight. When we got back to the States, it was very weird. So we left on December 13th at the end of the day. And we arrived back in Los Angeles on December 13th, but in the morning. So we effectively lived Friday, December the 13th, 2 times. And the second one was a lot more chaotic than the first one. It's just such those flights, going back almost an entire day in time, it's just very confusing on the body. And I will say that I did ultimately experience maybe the worst jet lag of my life, but it was some unfortunate cocktail of jet lag and just being sick, which is probably the result of spending 1 month of walking every single day outside over 10 miles, no matter the weather conditions. By the time ultimately we left, I was so incredibly tired. Like, it's been a long time since I have been that degree of tired. But no rest for the wicked, because we got back and we had 4 days to get from Los Angeles to Vegas and repack our bags because we had another flight to go to the East Coast to spend time with our families for the holidays, which was amazing. And I'm very thankful for the pace of that trip, because the full force of my jet lag / sickness set in, of course, the day after we arrived in Florida to spend time with our parents. And as much as it sucks to be sick over the holidays, it was a graciously slow pace of life. So it gave me plenty of time to recover. Since being back, Owen and I have been trying to do kind of like periodic check-ins with each other, just on how we're feeling mentally, what we're missing. I think it's kind of just our way of sifting through all of the experiences and the emotions that are honestly tied to these big trips to see what we're left with. And it's a process that I really enjoy, because I think it ultimately causes us to be very reflective. And I'm sure this will come as a shock to absolutely no one, but we really miss Japan. I think that it just spoke to us in a way that I don't know that any other place has. And I think that that's incredibly special. It doesn't happen very often, but now we're just kind of left with this feeling of, what do we do with that? And I really don't have an answer. But that's just kind of like where we're at right now from a taking it all in perspective. I will say that ultimately something tells me we will be going back to Japan a lot sooner rather than later. I just think that we got a taste of something that we've really liked, and we want a whole lot more of it. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this new experiment in format. I'm sure it won't be the last.